27% of Canadians said they believe that assisted dying should be available to people for poverty. So people who cite poverty as the reason that they want to seek this program, 27% of Canadians. And the number goes up for 18 to 34-year-olds in terms of answering that question. 28% said you should be able to access medical assistance in dying if you're homeless. 43% said mental illness. 50% said disability. 51% said you should be able to access this program if you are unable to receive medical treatment. I was shocked by this. We've talked a lot about the program in Canada, and I feel like every week another shocking story has come out. I mean, I'm thinking about a couple months ago, there was a story about a teenager who was diagnosed with, I think, type 2 diabetes, and he was facing maybe losing his eyesight. And his mom discovered that he had been approved for this program. And thankfully, she stepped in and showed up at the hospital and was able to stop the process. But he basically said, I don't want to be blind. And he was a teen, and they started the process. And that was shocking. But I'm shocked by these stats as well. What is your take on these?
Last week I was doing an interview with a former professor of mine in seminary, someone who I think is one of the finest bioethical minds in America. He's still just a friend and a mentor in so many ways, and we were working on a project that will be forthcoming in several months. But he used the term, euthanasia juggernaut, and I asked him what he meant, and he said, look, this culture of death that has taken so many lives at the beginning of life is now on this path to take life at the end of life. And Canada, of course, is the example. And we talked about the euphemisms that are used, doctor-assisted suicide, and in Canada's case, medical aid in dying, as if a medical professional in the Western tradition should ever give aid in dying. We should give care. But aid, it's not aid in dying, it's aid to die. It's literally making that happen. And, we've looked at Belgium and the Netherlands for years, and we've seen, okay, well, here are the sort of ethical dilemmas that they're now facing because of what they legalized 2 decades ago. Mm-hmm. Medical aid in dying in Canada started yesterday. And the speed at which it now has spread in so many different ways, and words have been redefined, and things that were taken for granted are now being redefined, where the right to die has so quickly becoming the duty to die, and the right to participate as a medical professional is so quickly becoming the duty that you can. I mean, this is real debates happening in the medical establishment in Canada, whether or not people who refuse to participate in abortions or medical aid in dying will even be able to be licensed. And in fact, I mean, the example of how quick this is, and then, how what was unthinkable yesterday is normalized today, and this is the great example, to our north, is that this survey came along with all kinds of headlines about most Canadians agree with where things are. Mm-hmm. And, most Canadians think that medical aid in dying has been good. But the rest of the survey went on to talk about all these other conditions that younger Canadians in particular want to make available medical aid in dying for, which aren't legalized and which aren't terminal conditions, which aren't even medical conditions: poverty, homelessness, not to mention mental health issues. And then you go back and go, that's what's called burying the lead, folks. The lead is not, most Canadians agree with the way medical aid in dying is being carried out. The lead is, since medical aid in dying has been legalized in Canada, the culture of death has infected particularly the young, and more people are at risk. Yes. This is the lead, and this is what we forget about laws. And this goes back to a conversation we had 2 weeks ago maybe, about whether Christians should care about culture. Yes, here's an example of why. Yeah. Because laws are downstream from culture most of the time, but sometimes they change culture and they change what's normal. Something that's legal becomes normal. And this is an example with doctor-assisted death. We've seen it in Colorado. So then you have a philosopher, or actually, I don't know if she was a philosopher or whatever. We talked about this, who basically is saying, you know what? Oh, somebody who has an eating disorder.
She works at that clinic. She is a psychologist.
And it's actually happened that where death pills have been prescribed for this. And then you turn around and go, the same legislature then turns around and goes, somebody who's opposed to this should not be able, to do business. So pregnancy resource centers, who don't believe in our, way that we're thinking about death and so on, then they should be targeted for misinformation. And the abortion pill reversal drug should no longer be available in the state of Colorado. I mean, this is insane. This is, and this is, calling death justice and, right, wrong and up, down. I mean, this is an example of where all of this leads. The other thing that I thought too is that in this study of Canadian attitudes towards medical aid and dying, that when they extended it towards poverty and homelessness, isn't that the same argument that has been made to justify abortion? By the way, and not just by the original eugenicists, which, again, that was actually part of it. But how many times have we heard abortion advocates say, well, we have to have abortion, otherwise these kids will be born in poverty? Oh, okay. So at this point, what we think should be done is the sufferer should be punished. The suffering should not be alleviated. And that, of course, then cuts at the heart of the medical practice. What is medicine supposed to be? It is supposed to be about care. What is public policy supposed to do? At least in part, helping those who need that sort of help with a social safety net or whatever. But when all this stuff gets monetized and you don't have any sort of fundamental grounding for human value, then it becomes a math problem. And then you come up with these weird things like, oh, it'll be better for them if they're dead. And really, it's a rationalization that's being hoisted upon just the horrific commodification of human life.